If you've ever dealt with an HOA that thinks they can control everything, then you know exactly how frustrating it can be. I'm talking about those HOAs that seem to believe they can dictate every little detail of your property and your life. From ridiculous fines to unreasonable rules, it feels like they're constantly trying to make life harder for homeowners. But what happens when an HOA cop repeatedly targets you and starts running over your mailbox? Well, that's exactly what happened to me on my ranch. I've had my fair share of frustrations with HOAs, but this one really pushed me over the edge. And that's when things got personal. You see, I've been living on my ranch for quite a few years now, enjoying the peaceful, quiet life away from the city noise and the constant chaos. It's a place where I can unwind and relax, far away from the hustle and bustle. But apparently, my tranquil oasis wasn't immune to the reach of the HOA. It all started with something small, my mailbox. My ranch is situated at the end of a long driveway, and my mailbox is right at the edge of the property. It's an important piece of my property, as it marks the entry to my home and is part of the overall aesthetic of the place. At first, I thought nothing of it when my mailbox got hit by one of those HOA patrol cars. I figured it was just an accident, something that could easily be replaced. But then it happened again. And again. I tried fixing the mailbox after every incident, but the damage was always worse than before. After a few times, I realized it wasn't an accident anymore. Every time an HOA patrol car would come through, they'd zoom by at full speed, barely slowing down, and my mailbox would be knocked over or completely destroyed. I was getting fed up. I called the HOA to report the issue and asked for some accountability. I thought they would handle it properly, perhaps talk to the patrol officers, and prevent this from happening again. But I was wrong. The response I received was less than helpful. They brushed it off, acted like it wasn't a big deal, and told me there was nothing they could do. It was clear they had no interest in taking responsibility for the actions of their own employees. This wasn't just frustrating anymore, it was infuriating. My property was being damaged, and the HOA wasn't even making an effort to stop it. After several attempts to resolve the issue failed, I decided that I had had enough. Replacing the mailbox like usual wasn't going to cut it anymore. I needed to send a message, and I needed to do something they'd never expect. I wasn't just going to fix the problem, I was going to take matters into my own hands. So, I decided to install a mailbox that they would never see coming. This was going to be something they couldn't just run over and destroy without facing serious consequences. I spent some time researching and designing a mailbox that was not only sturdy but also something that would make a statement. I wanted it to be so unique and robust that it would send a clear message: you can't just destroy my property without facing the repercussions. The idea was simple but effective. This wasn't going to be your standard mailbox. It was going to be heavy-duty, reinforced with steel, and large enough to be impossible to miss. If they were going to try running over it again, they'd know they were dealing with something they couldn't easily fix or ignore. I got to work, gathering the materials and making sure everything was in place. When the new mailbox was finally installed, I stood back and took a moment to admire it. Not only was it functional, but it looked impressive. It was bold, it was strong, and it was impossible to miss. There was no way they'd be able to ignore it, and there was no way they could drive over it without facing some serious consequences. I felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing I wasn't just passively accepting their actions anymore. I had taken control of the situation. Sure enough, when the HOA patrols came around again, I watched from my window as they approached the new mailbox. They slowed down, took a long look, and then, to my surprise, they drove off. I couldn't help but smile. They had finally realized they couldn't just push me around and destroy my property without paying the price. That mailbox had done exactly what I wanted. It sent a clear message that I wasn't going to back down. Since then, I haven't had another issue with my mailbox. The HOA patrols have kept their distance, and I've been able to enjoy my ranch in peace again. If you've ever dealt with an HOA problem like this or faced harassment on your own property, you know how frustrating it can be. But sometimes, standing up for yourself and taking control of the situation is the best way to deal with it. Don't let anyone, whether it's an HOA or anyone else, push you around or damage your property without facing the consequences. If you've had your own struggles with HOAs or have any similar stories, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. Don't forget to like this video if you've had enough of HOA drama, and make sure to subscribe for more content where I show you how to fight back and take control of your property. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. So here's how it all started. It seemed like such a small issue at first, something that could easily be brushed off as an accident. One day, I came home to find my mailbox knocked over. The first thought that ran through my mind was, well, maybe someone didn't see it, or they just weren't paying attention. After all, it's on the edge of my property, right near the road, so it's not like it was a huge surprise that someone might accidentally clip it while driving by. I wasn't too upset. I picked it up, repaired it, and moved on. It wasn't until the second time that I began to feel uneasy. It happened again, only a few weeks later. My mailbox, which had been in perfect condition, was once again smashed to the ground. I looked at the tire marks in the dirt and started to wonder, could this really be an accident again? But this time, I began to notice something strange. As the HOA patrols continued to drive by, they didn't seem to slow down. They didn't take extra care to avoid it. It was almost like they were driving right past my mailbox with the intention of not stopping or giving it a second thought. I brushed it off at first, but when it happened for the third time, I started to realize this wasn't just some random occurrence. My mailbox was being targeted. At that point, I began to think there was something more deliberate at play. These HOA cops, who had no real authority over my private property, seemed to be using their position to harass me. It wasn't like they were driving by and just didn't notice. They were speeding by at full speed, barely slowing down, and my mailbox was becoming collateral damage. Every time they passed, it was like they were in a rush to cause more damage. I couldn't keep repairing it, replacing it over and over again, and watching it get destroyed for no reason. I had enough. Frustrated, I called the HOA office. I explained the situation and asked them to intervene. I told them that their patrol officers were clearly driving recklessly and that they needed to take accountability for the damage being done. I didn't want to escalate things, but I did expect them to do something about it. I was trying to be reasonable. But their response was underwhelming, to say the least. They told me that they'd look into it, but offered no real solution, and nothing changed. The following week, it happened again. My mailbox was destroyed yet again, and there was no accountability on their part. I called the HOA again, and once more, they dismissed it. Their lack of action was becoming frustrating, and I started to feel like my concerns didn't matter. No matter how many times I called, no matter how many complaints I filed, nothing was happening. At this point, I realized something needed to change. The HOA was clearly not taking my issue seriously. I couldn't rely on them to fix the problem. They had already shown they didn't care enough to do so. I had been more than patient, but the situation was escalating, and my patience was running thin. I realized I needed to take control of the situation, especially since it was affecting my property and the quality of life on my ranch. It wasn't just about the mailbox anymore. It was about the principle of standing up for my rights as a homeowner and not letting these HOA cops continue to take advantage of me. This wasn't just about a mailbox anymore. It was about respect. If they weren't going to respect my property and stop damaging it, I would have to find a way to make them stop. I knew I couldn't rely on the HOA to fix the problem. That's when I started to plan a response, something that would put an end to this cycle of damage and send a clear message that I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to just fix my mailbox and let them destroy it again. I was going to make it clear that I wasn't going to stand for any more harassment. The time had come to take matters into my own hands. The HOA had made it clear they weren't going to help, so I needed to find a way to fight back that would make an impact. I wasn't going to let them continue this reckless behavior with no consequences. I needed a solution that would stop them in their tracks, something they'd never expect, and something they'd be forced to take notice of. It was clear that if I didn't take action, nothing would change. And I wasn't going to let this issue drag on any longer. This was my property, and I was going to take a stand. That's when I began to think about what I could do to not just fix the mailbox, but to actually send a message. It was time to take matters into my own hands. Now, I could have easily gone down the usual route, replace the mailbox, maybe file a complaint, and wait for the same thing to happen again. I could have taken the standard approach, hoping that this time things might change, but deep down, I knew that wouldn't work. After all, I tried that already. I had replaced the mailbox countless times, filed complaint after complaint, and gotten nowhere. It was clear to me that the HOA wasn't interested in holding its patrols accountable or taking my concerns seriously. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that if I didn't do something bold, this would just keep happening. I wasn't about to let them get away with destroying my property over and over again, without any repercussions. I knew I had to do something that would send a clear message. Something inside me snapped. I was sick of playing by the rules when the HOA wasn't. I had been patient, I had been reasonable, and now I was done waiting for the HOA to step up. I wanted to show them that I wasn't going to be an easy target. So, I decided to think bigger. Instead of just fixing my mailbox, I was going to install one they couldn't just drive over and destroy without facing serious consequences. I wasn't just looking for a solution to the immediate problem, I wanted to make a statement. I wanted them to know that this wasn't going to fly anymore. It was time to stop being passive and start taking control. I started brainstorming. I thought about what would make my mailbox stand out. It had to be something that was not only functional but eye-catching. I didn't want a typical mailbox that would blend in with the others. I needed something that would grab their attention and make them think twice before speeding by again. I wanted something bold, something that would be impossible to ignore. I thought about how to make it both a practical mailbox and a symbol of resistance against their reckless behavior. After doing some research and considering my options, I decided to go with a design that was both strong and noticeable. I knew I didn't want just a wooden post with a flimsy metal box. No, this had to be something built to last. I needed a mailbox that could withstand whatever the HOA patrols threw at it, literally. So, I chose a heavy-duty steel frame, reinforced with extra layers to ensure durability. I wanted it to be able to take the impact of a car without getting destroyed. It needed to stand strong, even when the patrols drove by at full speed. But strength alone wasn't enough. I also wanted this mailbox to send a message, loud and clear. I decided to design it with a bold, unconventional look, something that would catch their eye the second they saw it. I added a large, prominent sign on the side with a simple, powerful statement, "Not your property." It was a direct challenge to the HOA, making it clear that I was taking ownership of my land and I wasn't going to tolerate any more damage or harassment. I also made sure the mailbox itself was hard to miss. It was big, it was bold, and it was impossible to ignore. I wanted it to be so visually striking that even if the HOA patrol tried to run it over, they'd have to face the consequences. I knew it wasn't going to be easy for them to simply crush it and get away with it like they had done with the previous mailbox. It wasn't just a functional mailbox anymore, it had become a symbol of my determination to take control of my property and stand up against their careless behavior. This was no longer about just fixing a mailbox. This was about making sure they understood that they couldn't keep running roughshod over me or my land. As I worked on assembling the new mailbox, I felt a sense of empowerment. I was no longer sitting idly by, hoping for someone else to take action. I was taking control of the situation and doing it in a way that would send a message, one that they couldn't ignore. The old mailbox had been easy to destroy, but this one would be different. This one would stand strong, just like my resolve. When it was finally complete and installed, I stood back and admired my work. It wasn't just a mailbox, it was a statement. It was a reminder to the HOA patrols that my property was mine, and I wasn't going to let anyone, especially them, damage it without facing consequences. I was done being passive. I was done waiting for the HOA to act. From now on, I would take matters into my own hands, and I would make sure they knew it. This new mailbox wasn't just about protecting my property. It was about standing up for my rights and showing the HOA that they couldn't just come in and do whatever they wanted, whenever they felt like it. It was my way of saying, enough is enough. And I knew that when they saw it, they'd understand exactly what I meant. After weeks of frustration and dealing with the relentless destruction of my mailbox, I finally decided to take matters into my own hands. I wasn't going to let the HOA's so-called cops keep running over my property without facing consequences. So, I set out to design a mailbox that would not only stand out but would also stand strong against any future attempts at destruction. I knew it had to be something different, something that would send a message loud and clear, not just to the HOA patrols, but to anyone who thought they could disregard my property and get away with it. I spent a few days planning, designing, and ultimately building a mailbox that was not only strong but nearly indestructible. I didn't want to settle for anything ordinary. This wasn't going to be just another mailbox, this was going to be a fortress, built to last. I started with a heavy-duty steel frame. Steel would provide the structural integrity I needed, ensuring that the mailbox could take the impact of any vehicle without buckling or collapsing. I reinforced the steel frame with multiple layers of protection, including thick metal plates on the sides and a solid base that would make it practically impossible to knock over. It had to be able to withstand a car hitting it at full speed, and I was determined to make sure it would. But strength alone wasn't enough. I needed this mailbox to be impossible to miss, something that would stand out and make anyone driving by take notice. So, I went with a design that was big, bold, and unique. The mailbox itself was much larger than any typical mailbox you would find. I added a sleek, modern finish, and I even included a custom design with some personal touches that would make it stand out. The idea was to create something that not only functioned well but also made a statement. It had a certain industrial, almost intimidating look to it, definitely not the kind of mailbox you'd expect to see sitting at the edge of someone's driveway. To make sure that it wasn't just a mailbox but a declaration of resilience, I decided to add a few creative touches. I painted the mailbox a bright, eye-catching color, something that couldn't be ignored, even from a distance. I added a bold, unapologetic message on the side of the mailbox, something that read, "Not your property," in large, clear letters. I wanted to send a message that said, "This is my land, and I'm not going to tolerate any more disrespect or damage." The message wasn't just a visual cue, it was a statement of defiance against those who had been running roughshod over my property for too long. Once the mailbox was built and installed, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. As soon as it was in place, I knew I had taken the right approach. This wasn't just a mailbox, it was a symbol of my refusal to let the HOA dictate how I use my property. I had spent enough time trying to play by their rules, hoping they would take responsibility for their actions. But that wasn't working. Now, I was playing by my own rules, and I wasn't going to let anyone, especially the HOA, disregard my rights as a property owner. The size, the sturdiness, the bold message, everything about this mailbox screamed that it wasn't something that could be run over and forgotten. This was a mailbox that had been built for a purpose, not just for functionality. It was a statement of strength, resilience, and resistance. I wanted the HOA patrols to understand that this wasn't a problem that could be easily ignored or swept under the rug. They were going to have to reckon with the consequences if they tried to destroy my property again. When the new mailbox was finally in place, I felt a sense of satisfaction. I had done more than just fix a broken mailbox, I had taken control of the situation. I knew that if they ever tried to run over this one, they would be in for a huge surprise. The mailbox had been designed to stand strong in the face of adversity, and it had been built to last. No longer would I be a passive victim of their reckless behavior. I had taken a stand, and I was ready to defend my property. The HOA patrols would have to think long and hard before they even considered attempting to destroy it. When the patrol cars came by next, I waited. I knew they'd be taking a good look at what I had installed. And when they did, I hoped they would understand the message I was sending. They couldn't just keep running over my mailbox and expecting me to fix it without any repercussions. This time, they were going to be the ones who had to deal with the consequences. So, what happened next? After putting in all that effort to design and build the perfect mailbox, I waited. I knew that the HOA patrols would be coming by again sooner or later, and I was curious to see how they would react to the new mailbox. I had put a lot of time, thought, and energy into making sure this wasn't just a functional replacement, but a bold statement about not tolerating their careless behavior anymore. I was prepared for whatever happened next, but I never imagined just how quickly the outcome would unfold. It didn't take long before the patrol cars came down the road once again. I watched from a distance, feeling a sense of anticipation as they approached. There was no way they couldn't see the new mailbox. It was big, it was bright, and it was impossible to miss. As the patrol car slowly neared, I could feel my heart rate pick up. I had no idea what they would do, but I was ready for whatever came next. Would they try to drive over it again, or would they finally realize that this wasn't something they could just destroy without consequence? As the car approached the mailbox, something happened that I didn't expect. They slowed down. I could see them take a good look at the new mailbox, as if they were studying it. I could tell they were trying to figure out how to approach it, and when they saw the bold message and the sturdy design, I could almost hear them thinking, "This isn't something we can just run over." For the first time, I saw them hesitate. They didn't speed by like they always did in the past. They didn't make any move to hit it. Instead, they slowly drove past, keeping their distance. It was a small victory, but it was significant. They realized this was no ordinary mailbox, and they could no longer act with impunity. The way they slowed down, the way they looked at it, showed me that they understood the message I was sending loud and clear. I wasn't backing down. I wasn't going to let them disrespect my property anymore, and I had made sure they knew that. This wasn't just about protecting a mailbox, it was about standing up for my rights as a homeowner and letting the HOA know they couldn't just push me around. And the best part? I never had to deal with that issue again. The patrols never ran over my mailbox again. There was no more destruction. No more frustration. The problem was solved, not just because I had replaced the mailbox, but because I had made it clear that there would be consequences if they kept acting like this. The new mailbox had done its job, and the message had been received loud and clear. I wasn't just protecting my property, I was also taking a stand against an oppressive system that tried to bully me into submission. If you're tired of being pushed around by an HOA or dealing with unreasonable rules and harassment, take a lesson from this. Sometimes, it's not enough to just sit back and accept the situation. Sometimes, you need to make a statement. Don't let them push you into submission. Stand your ground. Make your property something they can't ignore. Show them that you won't tolerate their behavior, and they'll think twice before trying to pull the same stunt again. The best part of all of this wasn't just that I didn't have to replace my mailbox anymore. It was the fact that I had taken control of the situation. I had fought back in a way that was creative, clever, and effective. Instead of passively accepting what was happening, I took action. I took responsibility for protecting my property. And in the end, it worked. This experience taught me a valuable lesson. You don't have to accept harassment or injustice, especially when it comes to your own land. Whether you're dealing with an HOA, difficult neighbors, or any other form of unfair treatment, you have the power to take control. Sometimes, all it takes is standing firm, making a statement, and not backing down. You don't have to play by their rules if their rules are unfair. Don't be afraid to take matters into your own hands, because sometimes that's the only way to get results. So, if you've ever been harassed by an HOA or had your property damaged by people who think they can do whatever they want, remember this story. Stand your ground, make a statement, and show them that you won't tolerate their behavior. If I can do it, so can you. Don't let them get away with it.